If you never played League of Legends, lucky bastard, you should know that there is so much more to this universe than the game itself, and most of the stuff that carries the name League of Legends is not far from perfection, except for the game. Released in 2009, League of Legends is an online multiplayer game played in matches with 2 teams of 5 vs 5, developed and published by Riot Games. Ironically, this company only had this one game for almost 10 years. They only made sense to the S in Riot Games when they released Teamfight Tactics in 2019, followed by Valorant and Legends of Runeterra in 2020, but that's just for context. League of Legends is one of the most popular free-to-play games in the world, and it has been like this for over a decade. On release, it only had 40 champions, which are the game's playable characters. Nowadays, they have 172 champions and releasing something along the lines of 3 to 6 new champions every year. And of course, each character has its own personality and lore. A game so popular with so many interesting characters and such a strong player base, of course the company behind it will have their eyes on the expansion of the whole thing. But first, let's take a look at the game's lore, because League of Legends have an actual story behind it since day one. Every champion has its own lore, but in the early 2010s when the game was released, we only had a couple of pages about each one, and the backstory of the game itself was all different. After a series of catastrophic events known as Rune Wars, the most powerful people in the world created something called the Institute of War to resolve political disputes without creating any more world-scale conflicts. Powerful mages called summoners would choose and control champions to fight in the fields of justice in order to settle their differences. Those battles and this champion roster were known as League of Legends, and each champion had its own reason to be a part of the league. That was the game's base lore. As you may have guessed, the summoners are the players. It was very meta. The champion stories didn't have a real connection besides some very specific cases, and of course the fact that all of them were fighting in the same arena. The way the story was told was kinda confusing and not very scalable, because as new champions were released they had to do an insane amount of effort to make it all fit in the same exact timeline to justify them fighting each other. So in 2014, Riot decided to scrap all of that. The main reason is that the summoners were the focal point of the story and not the actual characters in the game. Besides that, having these battles in the fields of justice being just some sort of game of chess to resolve political conflicts limited the story and its sense of urgency, making it impossible to tell more epic and large-scale stories. Nowadays, what happens in the game is not at all part of the story. What we have today comes closer to a group of kids playing with their superhero toys. They have battles, interactions, and even some storytelling, but none of that has any real effect on the source material. Since the game is not a part of the lore anymore, they have space to expand as much as they like. They can kill characters, bring people from different moments in time, or even different dimensions and timelines, because they don't have to worry about making sense out of them being all together in the same arena at the same time anymore. I'm not gonna take your day explaining the whole current League of Legends lore to you, but I'm not leaving you in the dark either. I will try to give you a very quick and concise sum up of all of League's lore up until this point. Just keep in mind that I'm sparing a lot of details here. Remember that each champion has its own story and there is 172 of them. Some of them are intertwined, but overall it's kinda hard to cover. First, there was nothing. Just pure emptiness, also known as the Void. Then the universe was created. Life started to sprout when celestial beings called aspects used ancient powerful runes to shape a place they called Runeterra. Civilizations took place in this world. Nowadays its main territories are Noxus, which is a military expansionist empire, Demacia, a hypocritical kingdom that banished any form of magic out of fear, Ionia, a peaceful land where people live in harmony with the spiritual realm and the nature, Piltover, a very wealthy city of scientists, Zaun, a crime-filled undercity that was once part of Piltover, the Shadow Isles, a cursed land of undead spirits, and Freljord, a frozen tribal land in the far north. Also there is Targon, which is kinda like Mount Olympus but for the aspects, Bilgewater, a place of pirates, Shurima, an empire in the middle of the desert that doesn't exist anymore, and Ishtal, a hidden society that everyone believed didn't exist anymore. Demacia and Noxus are antagonists to each other, since Demacia is the biggest kingdom in the world besides Noxus, and the Noxians have that let's conquer the world mentality. Noxus tried to take over Ionia once and failed catastrophically. Also there are these creatures in the void named the Watchers, who are trapped through a rift in Freljord behind true ice, which is magical ice that never melts and it's harder than iron, but the corruption of the void still leaks into the material world. If the true ice in Freljord cracks, the Watchers will essentially take over and it's the end of the world. Like I said, I spared a lot of details and didn't even touch the individual champions lore, so if you're interested in hearing the complete story I can make a video about that, just let me know in the comments. The point is, League of Legends has a very rich and detailed story behind it. Sometimes something happens in the game, like the release of a new champion or a skin line event, or they just decide to come up with a new short story, and with that we get to know a little bit more about the lore. I know people who were never interested in the game but love to read the story. Both the champions and the world building are so compelling, it's really worth it to get to know more. Since we're good about how the game's lore works, it's time to talk about the one thing that was a real game changer for the whole League of Legends storyline. And if you're not familiar with the game, good thing that this is the one that people who barely knows the game exists recognize: Arcane. So a few years ago, Netflix woke up one day and decided to make a League of Legends animated show. Based on the story of the sisters Vi and Jinx, both champions from the game, Arcane brought to us a new perspective to League's lore, and they had absolutely no business being so good. Arcane is probably the best Netflix original content, one of the best TV shows of all time, and I'm not counting only animated stuff, I'm saying it's among the best TV shows, period. It was supposed to be some sort of parallel universe telling a standalone story with some of the beloved characters from the game, a League of Legends story. But the show was so good and the audience reaction to it was so groundbreaking that they made Arcane canon in the League of Legends lore and changed a whole bunch of stuff in-game just to fit Arcane. So a League of Legends story became essentially the story of League of Legends. Mel and Ambessa are two original characters from the series that were made into champions. Ambessa was released in the game by the end of 2024 and Mel was released in early 2025. They are both entirely new playable characters now. And not only from new content live the legacy of Arcane, this show's universe merged itself with the game so hard that the game's entire lore is slowly being rewritten again. The very existence of the show basically retconned the lore of every single character from the game that has some participation in the show. And not only them, almost everything in the game had to be rewritten in order for this world to make sense. Some people see this as a bad thing, but League's lore was a bit messy before, some characters don't even have a story. So I think that even with some loose ends here and there, Arcane made League of Legends lore overall something much better. And with time, I bet everything will be put into place and every character will have their space in the story. Jinx and Vi are sisters, as we know from the show, and now we have a more solid background. Back in the day, Jinx and Vi were never even confirmed to be siblings. Jinx used to be just a maniac criminal, like the Joker, but with little to no background story. She always had a lot of personality, but her lore and motivations, especially to why she is crazy, were a complete mystery. Vi, on the other hand, didn't change that much. She was a criminal from Zaun that switched sides and started working with Caitlyn in the Piltover police. And the sister situation was just a very popular fan theory based on some information from the lore and things the characters say when you're playing. Vi and Caitlyn work in Piltover, and Jinx had a mysterious origin, but her lore said that people noticed traces of the Hextech technology in her guns, which is from Piltover, and some of the Zaun style in her clothes. Now, if you watched Arcane, you remember that it takes place in both these cities, Piltover and Zaun. Also, Jinx has an in-game line saying she has a sister who's even crazier than her.
You think I'm crazy? You should see my sister.
And Vi has an interaction with an NPC that says she looks like her sister.
You look like your sister. Wait, I'm not supposed to talk about that.
So it was confirmed that they both have a sister, but nothing officially saying that Vi's sister is Jinx or vice versa. Arcane just explained all of that in detail and made the Caitlyn Vi fanfic official. Good for them. But the one that got the most drastic changes individually was Victor. Before Arcane, Victor was a crazy brilliant scientist obsessed with changing the world, but he got betrayed a few times and got his work stolen, so he started to believe that humans are weak and inefficient by nature. He replaced his body parts with machinery to eliminate emotional factors and wanted everyone to do the same. Because of Arcane, they changed some of his powers and lines in-game, his appearance, he got a new skin, everything. He was almost completely reworked because of the show. Arcane did so much good to him. Now his story is more compelling. It switched from a mad scientist kind of thing to a brilliant student trying to survive, trying to help people and make the world a better place, and connects better to the rest of the world and the other characters like Heimerdinger, Singed, and especially Jace. They were roommates. Warwick is another case of not complete rewriting of the backstory but explaining it. For those who only know the story through Arcane, Warwick is some sort of scientific experimental werewolf. He was once a gangster from Zaun and his body was mutated by Singed and he became a feral creature, a cold-blooded killer. Sounds familiar? Yeah, that's Vander right there. Even though he was never named Warwick in Arcane besides the subtitles, Riot confirmed that Vander is in fact the gangster from Zaun who was transformed into Warwick. But it's not always rainbows and butterflies. There is one very important detail that Riot changed in Arcane that kinda messed with everything else. Hextech. Hextech is described as the perfectly functional mix of technology and magic. In the old lore, Hextech had a very dark origin. They were crystals extracted from the dead bodies of an ancient race from Shurima called Brackern. There is one Brackern still alive called Skarner. He's a champion in the game and I'll come back to him in a bit. These crystals contain the memories and wisdom of the Brackern, and when they died, the crystal would also hold their soul until another Brackern inherited it. The clan pharaohs from Piltover discovered and mined the hex crystals to do some research around it. They found a way of synthesizing it to a less powerful but more reliable version, which was later used by Camille in her body augments. Jace had a big part on it as he was the brilliant mind that discovered the potential of the hex crystals and used it to create all kinds of tools and machinery. However, in Arcane, Jace and Victor discovered and stabilized the crystals, creating everything we see in the show. And Skarner was reworked in the game a few years ago. His visuals and story completely changed, and since his new lore does not create any connection with the hex crystals, now there is no correlation between Hextech and the Brackern. Like I said before, Victor's lore changed a whole lot in Arcane, and now the Hextech has a big role in his story. But here's the thing, remember Camille, that woman from the clan pharaohs I just mentioned? Well, she's a champion from the game who has scissor legs, and she's super important from the old Hextech lore. The clan pharaohs is mentioned in Arcane, and it is even possible that they are the ones who provided the hex crystals to Jace and Victor, but in the way the story is told in the show, Camille's lore doesn't make sense. Everyone theorized that she would show up in season 2, but that didn't happen, so now she's in some sort of storyline limbo. Another champion with heavy participation in the whole Hextech thing that wasn't even mentioned in Arcane is Seraphine. Her story is basically that her parents came from Zaun to Piltover searching for a better life. Since she was a child, Seraphine listened to people sing on the streets and sang with them, but she noticed that these songs were maybe a bit too particular for her to be hearing. She then discovers that she was born with the magical ability to hear other people's souls, but that was too overwhelming, so her parents created a Hextech device that could muffle the voices. But with that, she started to listen to another voice, different from the others. A voice that was also singing. She was now listening to the souls of the Brackern. In time, she learned to control these abilities and coexist with the voices from the Hextech, singing along with the Brackern song. That made her super good at music and a famous pop star with the dream of reuniting Piltover, her homeland, and Zaun, her parents' homeland. But the division between Piltover and Zaun happened in Arcane, so her story has to be placed a good couple of decades after the show. But the show ends with the overuse of Hextech being highly disapproved, and probably Piltover will be a lot more careful with that. And the biggest problem is the Hextech does not have the Brackern souls anymore, so her lore needs drastic changes. Camille's story can be solved by just placing her in another moment of the timeline, and Seraphine just needs to stop listening to the voices in her head. But I have to mention the case of the champion that stopped existing in the canon, Blitzcrank. Blitz is a robot created by Victor. He built him to be a waste collector in Zaun, but upon messing with Hextech, the robot came to life and gained conscience, living as a patrolman in the other city. However, Arcane never mentions Blitzcrank. Victor could not have created him before the show because there was no Hextech, and by the end there is no Victor, what makes his very creation impossible. The showrunner said that there was a storyline for Blitz in season 2, but they cut it out because they didn't think it made sense with the story they wanted to tell, which is fine, but now the character with his lore the way it is canonically does not exist anymore. But even though Arcane made some stuff lose its sense and forced a lot of rewriting, I'm sure it's for the best. The changes in the story are very positive. Like I said before, Arcane made League of Legends lore overall something much better. Even if they need to change the story of characters that already had a perfectly working story, I think the lore is getting better by the day. And speaking of story, did you know that League of Legends has some parallel universes with unique stories told by skin lines? Skins are cosmetic products, which means they only make visual changes and don't affect how the game is played at all. In League, most of the skins have a story to tell. For example, the project skins tell the story about a sci-fi cyberpunk universe where humans fight against machines and big AI corporations. In the Spirit Blossom, champions are either spirits or paladins based on the Ionian myths. My personal favorite, the High Noon skin line, is a Wild West universe mixed with steampunk elements. And the ones I want to focus now are the musical universes, but first let's walk backwards. We just talked about Arcane, but did you pay any attention to the music while watching? It's incredible. For me, the highlights are Paint the Town Blue by Ashnikko, Heavy is the Crown by Linkin Park, Playground by Bia Miller, and of course, the show's opening theme. Enemy by Imagine Dragons. But there are a lot of other amazing songs originally created for the show. I recommend you listen to them all, you can find complete playlists out there. Taking a step back, one great tradition Riot created is the World's Championship Anthem. Every year there's an international League of Legends tournament that puts the best teams in the world against each other. I'll circle back to this subject in a minute, but what you need to know right now is that every edition of this tournament have an original anthem. Every year, Riot commissions an artist or a band to create the world's theme song, and they rarely miss. Most of them are amazing and epic, it's really worth a spot in your personal playlist. In my opinion, the best ones are Heavy is the Crown by Linkin Park for the 2024 Worlds, Gods by New Jeans for 2023, Rise by the Glitch Mob, Mako and the World Alive for 2018, and the first one ever and my favorite, the 2014 World's Anthem, Warriors by Imagine Dragons. Again, the commissioned songs by Imagine Dragons are better than the ones they make for themselves, I'll never get that. And Heavy is the Crown was mentioned again because it was both an Arcane original soundtrack song and the World's 2024 anthem, and it's also an absolute banger. Now take one more step back with me as we get back to the skin lines I explained a few moments ago. There are 4 skin lines in particular that you need to know in order to understand how great the League of Legends music is. We have Heartsteel and True Damage that only had one song each, Paranoia and Giants respectively. Heartsteel is a boy band that mixed K-pop and electronic music, while True Damage is more of a hip-hop and trap group. Another fictional band from the game is KDA. They are a K-pop group with 6 songs released between 2018 and 2020, and it's so good. KDA walked so K-pop demon hunters could run, and the one everyone forgets about because K-pop is such a trend, but deserves all the credit for being the very first League of Legends fictional band, Pentakill. Pentakill is a heavy metal band that exists since 2014 with their first album Smite and Ignite. They made a second album in 2017 called Grasp of the Undying and a third album in 2021 named Lost Chapter. They are all super good. If you're a metal fan, you need to give it a try. Unfortunately, I can't show you the actual music in the video because of copyright stuff, but you should definitely check it out. I'll leave some links down in the comments. And keep in mind that they are all fictional bands based on skin lines. You can play the game dressed as a member of these groups, which is such a creative concept, and they had no business being so good. League of Legends is a competitive game, it has its own ranking system, and on top of that it's an esport, which means there are actual athletes who play the game for a living and are paid to be good at it. I gave you a glimpse of that when I addressed the World's Championship before, but there is so much more. The game is divided in regions based on location, and each one has its own regional tournament happening 3 times a year. The winning teams go to the international tournaments, so when a team proves it's the best from their country, they go face other teams to decide who's the best in the world. There is first stand in the beginning of the year, the mid-season Invitational usually happening between June and July, and the before mentioned Worlds, which is the most important international League of Legends tournament, happening closer to the end of the year. I don't even have to say why this is a good thing, right? It's like watching any other sport, it's exciting to watch the professional players in high level tournaments even if you don't play it. It's super cool to watch the best players in the world doing some incredible stuff. It's an emotional, exhilarating experience even if you're not a fan of a particular team or player. For League's community, the World's Finals is like the Super Bowl. Millions of people watching 10 nerds fighting each other with their little fairies in a colorful digital game, and we freaking love it! People organize watch parties, they take the day to reunite and put the game on the big TVs, the whole tournament has official live broadcasting in over 20 different languages, Riot sends out correspondents from all over the world to cover the championship, it's a huge deal. This guy, known as Faker, who is considered to be the best professional player in history, is an absolute celebrity in Korea. People often put him in the same list as international artists like BTS and Blackpink. All of that just to say that watching the game is fun, sometimes even for people who never played. There is a sense of sportsmanship in the competitive scenario, and League of Legends is a whole niche of content creation. There is a lot of people who dedicate their streams or YouTube channels only to this one game. I haven't played the game in over a year and I still like to watch the professional matches and some gameplay videos every now and again, just because it's fun. Sometimes that makes me feel like getting back to playing it, but I will not fall for that trap. But why is it a trap again? The video is about how everything that carries the name League of Legends is good except for playing the game, so now that we talked about all of the amazing content around it, it's time to address that second part, the game itself. If you know anyone who plays League of Legends, you're probably familiar with a very interesting phenomenon. Everyone who plays it seems to hate it. It's a running joke that every player recommends you to stay as far away as possible from this game, like the players are straight up victims. But why? Well, because with time, playing this game becomes a collection of bad experiences. When you get a first look at it, it seems very fun and colorful, but also hard to learn, especially for people with little to no familiarity with this game genre or games in general. But if you're really into it, you put in the time and effort to learn how to play it, and now you're a bit of addicted. As time goes by, you get deeper and deeper into the concepts, the strategy, the numbers, the advanced stuff. And honestly, if you're nerdy enough, it only gets more interesting. Also, the replay factor of this game is literally unlimited. You can play every day, all day long, for years, and you're never gonna play the same match twice. And that is because there is a lot of variables. The characters change, the game is constantly changing, so the way you play it also changes, but most importantly, the players change. And with that, you realize the first big problem. The game is boring. It wasn't always like that, but League of Legends is a competitive game and there is 172 champions and a lot of different strategies. So in order for it to be fair like any other sport, they have to make it balanced. And the direct consequence of that is something called meta. Meta stands for most efficient tactics available, which are the most efficient tactics available. Now we have a game where it's always the same characters being played the same way with the same items and the same strategies, not because there is no other option, but because it's just not worth the effort to make something out of meta work. And in order to make the game balanced, they sacrificed identity over performance. I explained to you how the game's lore is amazing, but you barely see any of that in-game. See this dragon? This is Aurelium Sol. In the lore, he is a celestial being that spreads light where it passes and leaves behind a trace of himself. These traces of him mix up with cosmic dust and creates stars and entire planets. In the game, he is a flying hose. I don't know about you, but when I play with a powerful character, I want to feel powerful. But the meta dictates what champions should be played, and if you identify with a character that's out of meta, I'm afraid you're not gonna be winning a lot of matches. A well-balanced game feels fair, but a too balanced game is not fun. We should be able to see more of what makes each character unique, not unbalanced enough to make it unfair to play with a certain champion, just enough to be fun. While in the subject of balancing, I have to explain one very ironic thing about this game. I just said that in order to balance the game for the pro players, they made it boring, so they kinda suck at making a fantasy game. The thing is, they also suck at balancing it. There's always a little roster of champions that are above average with numbers way higher than they should, and that makes the game feel unfair if you are the one getting your ass handed to you by one of those champions. Riot struggles a lot with finding the perfect middle ground between fun and unfair. This is not entirely Riot's fault. A game with over 170 playable characters and each one having unique abilities, effects, interactions, it's almost impossible to balance. But then again, Riot's the one who chose to put this much characters in the game, so it is their fault. When talking about the replay factor, I mentioned that the most important variable that makes each game unique is the players. And they are, without a doubt, the worst part of the whole play in League of Legends experience. Everything I said about sportsmanship and sense of community, that was exclusive to people who watch the professional tournaments. The players are monsters. First of all, they are not very receptive to new players. If you're trying to get into the game, don't. But if you're trying to get into the game, it's natural that you won't have a clue what you're doing at first and probably will be an objectively bad player for a while before getting the hang of it. That's 100% normal. But League of Legends players have a very inflated ego, so they tend to think they have a better understanding of the game and better skill than their teammates, leading them to believe they know what's best in every single situation. So even in the lowest rankings, even if you're a beginner, if you play in any way, shape or form below absolute perfection, you're gonna get cursed at. And League's players are famous for being aggressive. I think aggressive is putting it lightly. Most of the time they are straight up criminals. It's a 5 versus 5 team game. It requires teamwork, which means that if one person decides they don't want to win the match, their team is most probably losing. There is a theory called 40-40-20 about online competitive games, stating that 40% of your matches are guaranteed losses, 40% are guaranteed wins, and the remaining 20% is entirely up to you and your individual performance. It makes perfect sense. Since you're in a team of 5, your contribution is 20%. And if you take a look at the win rate of any long-term player, they are always between 40% and 60%, because no matter how good a player is, like I just said, if one person decides not to play the game, you're probably losing. And this feeling that you, as a player, can only do so much is infuriating. You feel powerless towards the 4 random idiots that are placed in your team. And Riot does almost nothing to punish bad behavior. It's even more infuriating when someone intentionally sabotages your your game or call you names is racist or sexist or tells you to go die in a hole just because you didn't play the way they wanted you to, and after that this person is going to continue to play the game like nothing happened and go ruin someone else's day. It's unbelievable the amount of stuff people get away with in this game, and that only contributes to the bad experience of playing it. Another little problem, that's more of a recent one, is the company's greed. The game is free to play, so you pay with your soul. Their profit is based on microtransactions and there is no pay to win mechanic. The only thing they sell is cosmetics, the skins I mentioned before. A while ago you could get random skins for free just by playing the game. Sometimes after a match you would get a chest, and by opening it you could get a random skin for a random champion completely for free, and that doesn't exist anymore. Now what we have is skins that get progressively worse and more expensive. And this is not about getting free stuff. Most of the players are normal people with normal jobs and normal lives. They don't have a lot of free time to play. League of Legends is a game that is hard and tiring, and the average match is around 30 minutes, so it takes a good amount of time from your day. The casual player is not getting to the highest rankings on 1 or 2 games a day, and we just covered how the toxic community makes it even more exhausting. So what is the reward for playing it? Removing the chest with free skins means removing any sense of progression for the casual player. That mixed up with the game's premium content getting more and more expensive while getting worse by the minute only pushes away even the most loyal players, and what Riot doesn't seem to understand is that pushing away the players is what kills the game. Nothing can survive over 15 years without a very engaged community. All of that sums up to a result that is quite simple to realize. Playing League of Legends is an overall frustrating experience. There is no reason to play the game anymore if you're not getting paid for it. I believe some casual players are still there because they are addicted, and for something to be addictive it has to be somehow appealing, so I guess there is some people that still have fun with it despite all of the symptoms of a dying game. I think it's impressive how a company can make so much amazing content with so little. It was just a game with a few characters, and now it's a whole universe with incredible music, an amazing TV show, exciting professional tournaments, and awesome lore. But more impressive is how all of that can come from a game that is, at the same time, one of the most popular games in the world and one of the most hated ones.